Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Lusine, Sensorimotor. Lusine is the alias for Jeff McElwain, also Lusine, or Lusine ICL. He's an IDM artist from Texas, and yet another result of me checking through iTunes featured albums in the electronic section, hoping to find more newcomer acts. Except for the fact that Lusine is not actually a newcomer at all. The guy's got a fairly extensive back catalog that stretches back to 1999, and this album is actually his 8th studio album to date. So yeah, not exactly the kind of artist I could just quickly jump into like Visible Cloaks or Taliboman, hence my lateness. But I was still curious about him regardless. Seemed he had a fairly decent sized fanbase too. I'm always game for some more IDM or 90s techno acts to check out, and he looked promising, so here are my thoughts on his discography so far. Fairly similar to some Audiker or Microzik kind of material, but it's solid. He's got some pretty nice, albeit abstract melodies and abrasive beats, kind of like try-repeat-a sort of stuff. Nothing game-changing, but worth checking out. This one was significantly more interesting. Got quite a bit of down-tempo stuff in here, but also some glitchier and more experimental stuff in other parts. Definitely enjoyed this one too. More of the same kind of stuff as the previous two albums. I think I'm hearing some Monolith influence in there too. Found it to be a tad dull in comparison to the last one, but still not bad. This album is gorgeous. Loved this. Probably my favorite album from the guy to date. Best balance between his melodic side and his experimental side. This one is more ambient one. Some vague Tim Hecker vibes in some parts. Probably not as good as Serial Hodgepodge, but it's also freaking beautiful. Go check it out. Okay, by this point, I officially love this guy. This is like some lighthearted, chill-out techno kind of stuff, somewhere along the lines of Kenichi or maybe Q-Burn's Abstract Message. Very nice. Definitely the guy's poppiest album to date. Got several tracks with vocal guests, although again, it's really more the kind of pop you'd expect out of someone like Q-Burn's Abstract Message. It's very strange and still uses all those IDM synth tones. Still pretty darn good. Which brings us to here, and holy crap, how did I miss this guy before? He's awesome! All of these albums have turned out to be slightly different experiences, the guy continually moving his style into new territory and trying new things, even if he never really ventures into, like, totally never explored areas before. It's interesting that the guy can sometimes make music that both has some great melodies and down-tempo textures, but can also be like glitchy and abrasive sometimes too. Needless to say, I'm already very glad I sat down to check this guy out, and I was definitely excited to hear where he would take his sound next. I did notice there were a number of featuring credits on this one, so I suppose that could mean more of the same kind of stuff as The Waiting Room, but the more abstract album cover and design seemed to hint at something more experimental as well, so I just jumped right in. How did it turn out? Well, I think it is closer to The Waiting Room than his earlier, more abstract stuff, but there is definitely a turn towards the experimental compared to his last couple of efforts. The album is significantly rougher while still using those old IDM synth tones. There's quite a bit of abrasiveness too, thanks to audio distortion in many areas. There's more abstract instrumentals, and there's some poppier tracks too. Personally found myself enjoying the instrumentals more, stuff like Canopy, which had a lot of cool wind chime sounds that vaguely reminded me of like Four Tet's There Is Lovin' You. There's Scatter, which has a lot of interesting clarinet and other woodwinds being modulated and distorted. And there's also the track Tropopause, which is basically 3 minutes of like audio distortion ambience. Bit like Tim Hecker, but more simplistic, I think. And there's quite a few instrumentals that feature house or trance-influenced rhythms, but still with an abstract twist, like Slow Motion. Or The Level, which follows a similar formula but has a spooky middle section with a vague tribal feel to it. Or the bouncier and flute-tinged Flyway. Or the catchy and intense extended closer The Lift, featuring some very nice percussion tracks on the side. Meanwhile, the poppier tracks were still pretty enjoyable too, often a lot of vocal manipulations. Ticking Hands was probably my favorite in that department, featuring the voice of Sarah McElwain, who I presume is his wife. Got kind of a Zircon Killian Aversa style pair up there. Always nice. I think she also appeared on The Waiting Room, but I digress. Just a Cloud had a lot of chopped up vocals, kind of a generic chord progression, but not a bad track. It's catchy but also a bit bland compared to the brighter and jumpier Won't Forget, which has the same singer who I don't feel like trying to pronounce here. Witness is the only track with a male singer who I can't pronounce either, and does have an interestingly danceable but also introspective mood. As for how the album holds up overall, I'm currently not totally convinced that Sensorimotor is the best Lusine can do, especially after hearing albums like A Pseudo Steady State, Serial Hodgepodge, or A Certain Distance. It feels a bit simplistic and doesn't have quite the attention to detail that some of those earlier albums had. But the one thing I will have to give this album credit for is that this is probably the most unique album in his discography. Lusine often carries his influence on his shoulder and is pretty obvious about them, but it's not nearly as obvious here. Maybe later Fortet, but it's far from a rip-off or anything. It's a blend of poppy melodies and straightforward house rhythms, with subtle and warm IDM tones, experimental editing, and harsh distortion. Definitely gives the album its own unique sound, and I have to commend Lusine for doing his own thing instead of just paying tribute to his influences. And for what it's worth, even though it didn't blow me away like Serial Hodgepodge did, there is still a lot to enjoy here. The melodies are still as on point as they always are. The synths and other instrumentation is still quite interesting, the production is still top-notch, and it's still a fun and varied listen. Probably not his best, but certainly worth checking out, and after having heard a fair bit of what Jeff McElwain has to offer over his whole career, he officially has a new fan. I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion, you can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.